Namaskar. A warm welcome to World News and Indian Perspective on All India Radio. This is Gaurav Sharma and with me is Manoj Singh Rana, bringing glimpses of the major developments of the day from across the globe. Over the next half an hour, we shall bring you the latest from the world of politics, economy, sports, entertainment and more. The headlines. Prime Minister of India Narendra Modi chairs meeting of Cabinet Committee on Security following the events in Afghanistan. India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar discusses evolving situation in Afghanistan with his French counterpart. Indian Air Force aircraft C-17 brings back Indian envoy and officials from Kabul. New Delhi slams Islamabad for attacks on cultural heritage of minority communities in Pakistan. New Zealand orders snap lockdown after first COVID-positive case in 6 months. And India's Prime Minister interacts with para-athlete contingent for Tokyo 2020 Paralympic Games virtually. As the nationwide free COVID-19 vaccination campaign at government facilities for those above 18 years is underway, we advise our young listeners to get vaccinated and help others get vaccinated. We also advise our listeners not to lower their guard as COVID-19 remains a threat to our health. Please stay at home unless it is essential to go out and continue to follow these 3 simple steps. Wear a face mask, maintain 2 gaz ki doori for social distancing, and focus on hand and face hygiene. For any COVID-related information and guidance, contact the national helpline numbers 011-2397-8046 and 1075. And now, the news in detail. Prime Minister of India Narendra Modi chaired a meeting of the Cabinet Committee on Security on Tuesday evening. Official sources said the situation in Afghanistan was discussed in the meeting. Defence Minister Rajnath Singh, Home Minister Amit Shah, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman, Principal Secretary to Prime Minister Dr. P.K. Mishra, National Security Advisor Ajit Doval, Cabinet Secretary Rajiv Gauba and Foreign Secretary Harsh V. Shringla attended the meeting. External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar has discussed the evolving situation in Afghanistan with the French Foreign Minister Jean-Yves Le Drian. In a tweet, Dr. Jaishankar said India and France will continue to coordinate in the UN Security Council. The External Affairs Minister thanked Jean-Yves Le Drian for evacuating 21 Indian nationals from Kabul to Paris.
External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar has reached New York, where he'll be presiding over 2 high-level signature events of the United Nations. The first event will be an open debate on Wednesday on protecting the protectors, technology and peacekeeping. The second event on Thursday will be a high-level briefing on threats to international peace and security caused by terrorist acts. His visit to New York comes during India's presidency of the United Nations Security Council. The open debate on peacekeeping will focus on the theme of protecting the protectors, including through the use of modern technological tools to enhance the safety and security of peacekeepers and to aid peacekeeping missions. The Ministry of External Affairs has said that in the view of the prevailing situation in Kabul, it was decided that the Indian embassy personnel would be immediately moved back. The movement has been completed in 2 phases and the ambassador and other staff have reached New Delhi. It said India has been issuing periodic travel and security advisories for all its nationals in Afghanistan in view of deteriorating security situation. Those already in Afghanistan were urged to return immediately, while others were advised not to travel there. The MEA said it understands that a number of Indians are stranded in Afghanistan, some of whom are employed by third country organizations. It said our immediate priority is to obtain accurate information about all Indian nationals currently in Afghanistan. They and their employers have been requested to urgently share the relevant details with MEA's Special Afghanistan Cell on phone numbers +91 11 4901 6783, +91 11 4901 6784, +91 11 4901 6785. WhatsApp number is +91 80 1061 1290 and the email ID Situation Room at mea.gov.in. The Ministry of External Affairs said, as regards Afghan nationals, our visa services will continue through an emergency e-visa facility, which has been extended to Afghan nationals. This can be accessed through e-visa portal at indianvisaonline.gov.in/e-visa/registration. The ministry said it has already received requests from Afghan Sikh and Hindu community leaders and are in touch with them. It said the main challenge for travel to and fro from Afghanistan is the operational status of the Kabul airport. This has been discussed at high levels with our partners, including the External Affairs Minister, with the US Secretary of State. The MEA said the Government of India is committed to the safe return of all Indian nationals and will institute flight arrangements once the Kabul airport is open for commercial operations.
India today rushed back home its ambassador and staff from the embassy in Kabul in a C-17 Globemaster aircraft of the Indian Air Force in view of the situation in Afghanistan. 150 people, including diplomats, officials, security personnel and some stranded Indians landed at the Hindon Air Base near Delhi this evening after a brief halt at Jamnagar in Gujarat. Earlier, the aircraft carrying the Indian ambassador and other staff of the Indian embassy in Kabul halted for a few hours at Jamnagar Air Base today for refueling. Talking to media persons at Jamnagar, the Indian ambassador to Afghanistan, Rudrendra Tandon, said that the situation in Kabul is complex and quite fluid now. He said that 192 personnel of the Indian mission in Kabul were evacuated from Afghanistan literally within 3 days in a very orderly fashion in 2 phases. He said that the Indian embassy assisted and even gave shelter to many distressed Indians following the fast-changing situation in Kabul. He thanked the people of Jamnagar for the warm welcome at the Jamnagar Air Base. Uganda is to take in 2,000 refugees who have fled Afghanistan after the Taliban took power on Sunday. The first group of 500 Afghans are expected to arrive at Entebbe airport later on Tuesday. The deal was agreed following a request from the U.S. government, Refugee Minister Davinia Esther Enyakun told the media. Uganda has a long history of welcoming refugees and is currently home to around 1.3 million people who have fled conflict or other disasters. The East African nation has the largest number of refugees in any country in Africa and the third largest in the world. The new Afghan arrivals will be tested for COVID-19 before they are sent to isolation centers, Ms. Enyakun says. The U.S. is to cover these costs.
Germany has stopped development aid for Afghanistan for now, the minister responsible said on Tuesday after the Taliban swept back into power. State cooperation on development has been suspended for the time being, Development Minister Gerd Müller said in an interview with a local newspaper. The German government had agreed to send 430 million euros to Afghanistan a year, making it one of the biggest donors to the country. In today's Hotspot section, we bring you a discussion on Afghanistan at crossroads. In conversation are Yogendra Kumar, former ambassador, and Aditi Tandon, the journalist.
The Taliban's takeover of Afghanistan in dramatic events that unfolded over the weekend and finally leading to the collapse of Kabul on Sunday have naturally led to a major humanitarian crisis, and the world is watching in shock. Apart from the humanitarian crisis, Mr. Kumar, what also remains to be seen and what is increasingly evident now is that with the return of the Taliban, maybe the geopolitical alliances in the region are going to be rewritten, are going to change. There is the Taliban, which is supported by Pakistan. China is making the right noises with the Taliban. They have been engaged with Russia. And there are a number of these factors that point towards potential realignment of forces in the region and which directly leads to a security challenge for our own country. So where on the one hand we are facing this challenge of evacuating all the Indians safely out of Afghanistan, and the government has opened up a special e-visa category for such nationals today. It had already said yesterday that it will allow all non-Muslim minorities from Afghanistan to come into India. So that is one part of the challenge, and the rest of it relates to the security issue. How do you see the unfolding situation?
I think talking in terms of geopolitical alliances, of course, we can see the alliances kind of things emerging, but it's a little premature to talk in terms of alliances because any alliance, for it to be stable or sustainable, it requires a stable agency, a stable agent. If Afghanistan is a state of instability and uncertainty and still has yet to recover from a situation of state collapse, then perhaps how Afghanistan would really be, let us say, an agent for the geopolitical ambitions of either Pakistan or China or any other country, for that matter, I think is a little premature. So my biggest apprehension at the moment actually is that unlike 2001, when the Operation Enduring Freedom had led to the ousting of the Taliban, at that time, there was unanimity as to what kind of political settlement needed to be had in Afghanistan after the ejection of the Taliban. Now there is no unanimity. So because of the fact that the turnaround or change in regime which has taken place in such uncertain circumstances, I think everybody is very cautious and carefully weighing everything as to how things will develop and how they need to position themselves. And I'll give one example here straight away. Taliban certainly have sanctuary in Pakistan, and Pakistan could have done far more than what they have done to manage the situation better. But we also know that Taliban actually had no interest in negotiating in good faith for an intra-Afghanistan political settlement. And they kept on, in a way, in a deceptive manner, trying to divide various sort of groups who are interested and then finally to capture power in Kabul in particular. So I think they, of course, now the mounting problem that they're facing. For example, I do not think any of these people have any experience of governance. First of all, we talk about political settlement, a political framework, which actually is the basis for a state formation. Now, that is not very clear at the moment. Secondly, the capacity for governance. Obviously, from what you have seen, you don't see that actually manifest. The people that you see, the leadership, how you see them acting. At the same time, because of the fact that Afghanistan actually has collapsed despite the fact that Taliban has formally taken over the entire territory, the fact of the matter is that these other extremist elements, whether it's Al-Qaeda or it is ISIS or it is the other terrorist elements which actually have regional or national agenda, whether it's towards China, whether it's towards Tajikistan, towards Afghanistan, towards India, towards Pakistan, towards Iran, for example, and so on and so forth, and of course the US. So these people still are around. That's the whole point. So, for example, in the northern Afghanistan, the military campaign which took place, it is these people actually helping the Taliban in capturing the cities. Then the other side, which you see here when you talk about any kind of governance, the Taliban have been controlling the area, let us say, when Kabul was under their control, they controlled the rest of the area. Now, two major prisons, one is in Bagram, the other is Pule Charkhi, which are actually in the vicinity of Kabul. They actually have been high security prisons where not only Taliban prisoners have been kept, but also Al-Qaeda and other prisoners have been kept. Now, the Taliban, having control over that area, have actually opened the prison gates and everybody has gone out. So it shows the Taliban still have to maintain those alliances which they actually have with the terrorist elements. Well, that's one aspect. The other aspect, of course, is the fact that now everybody's talking about instability there, and because of that, the condition inside Afghanistan, talk of humanitarian situation, whether it is, as I said, migrations of people, whether it is transnational crime, or, for example, the situation of refugees overflowing in different territories, different neighboring countries. These are major issues, and India is facing a kind of a spillover of that itself. So at the moment, as I can see, the situation highly fluid, and again, you find something very, very unique here in this particular case, unlike the Bonn process which took place. You have negotiations going on in Kabul, you have negotiations going on in Islamabad, you have negotiations going on in Doha. And all these negotiations, in a way, Taliban actually are the key factor. Obviously, if they had genuine interest in making sure it's an inclusive government, then they would actually have one single negotiating process.
Right. You did mention that the situation is highly fluid and we would have to wait to see how things pan out. What I wanted to understand from you is, the Taliban has declared amnesty across Afghanistan today, and it has urged that women should join the government. And the attempt is perhaps, to convince the larger population across the globe and also the wary people at home in Afghanistan that this is a new Taliban. Do you, in your own experience, feel that the Taliban would have changed? Do you think the noises that they are making, although they're saying that women can be allowed to study and also work in government offices as per the Islamic law, which they do not define clearly, but they do actually go on to say that they will allow these things. Does that mark any departure from the old practices of the Taliban, which were naturally extremely Islamic and a very harsh interpretation of the Islamic law, which potentially threatens the gender right gains that have been made in Afghanistan, especially for women there?
I think you make a very important and a sensitive point. 20 years is a long time. Practically, a new generation has grown up in Afghanistan in a very different kind of a cultural and political environment, atmosphere. Now, for these people to reverse it back would actually be even more destabilizing. The other point, of course, here is that the Taliban have said that, but do they have the intent to implement what they actually have said? Secondly, do they have the capacity to implement what they have said? These two are very important issues, because at the moment, I do not know how many people who are studying an underlying situation in Afghanistan have a clear idea as to what is the authority structure like within the Taliban as an organization itself. I mean, you hear, for example, the UN report about terrorist activities emanating from in Afghanistan, with the latest UN report, despite the fact that Taliban have said that we have nothing to do with the terrorists and we'll make sure that these terrorists do not operate from our territory. But the action on the ground doesn't give you that confidence. So the point actually is that even for the Taliban, it's a very big task ahead of them, because, as I said, Afghanistan actually now in a very difficult situation. Its condition actually economically and from every point of view actually is extremely desperate. For them to say that they will, so they have an issue of trust deficit. It's a trust deficit within the country, within their own communities, and there's trust deficit outside. And I'll give you just one example of that. The Taliban are trying to get the civil servants who are working in the previous government. Now, the civil servants have no faith in them, so they are not coming forward. There have been instances where in the Mazar-e-Sharif, in Kandahar and other places, the Taliban have been going from door to door to the houses of the civil servants saying, you come back to work. But they are not sure whether they're too scared, whether they want to go back to work, what will happen to them. So the issue about women's rights is, again, they are talking in different terms, so to say. I mean, they say, okay, education, but what kind of education, for example? Would the women have the right of education that they want to choose? What kind of education they want to have? Can they go to university? Can they join professional degrees? Can they take them, for example? And after they have studied and they got their professional degrees, can they get employment in the Afghanistan under the control of Taliban? These are very, very big issues.
Right. So that's a very important analysis that you just gave of the whole situation, and the point that the generation has changed, and really the onus is on the Taliban now to put its best foot forward as the world watches. And we all saw how Germany halted its development aid to Afghanistan today after the Taliban control. So naturally the world is responding also dynamically. And as you said, we need to wait to see how this goes. But coming back to the security challenges vis-a-vis India, although you said earlier that it is a little premature, but I think I would again press you for some opinion going back into the history after the Russian occupation of Afghanistan ended, and we saw how General Ziaul Haq of Pakistan in those days used the situation to rapidly Islamicize Pakistan, and then we saw how these forces were used for proxy wars against India in Punjab as well as Kashmir. Although 1990s are not 2020, the situation has changed. But do you still sense some kind of a security threat perception for India that the Indian strategists need to now look out for?
Yes, I think so, because if the situation is volatile and chaotic, then obviously this is a situation which the terrorist elements actually are best at exploiting. So the possibility that some elements there must be having ideas in their heads that they must actually stage some terrorist act in India, that possibility cannot be ruled out, and I think our security agencies and the military and everybody are watching very carefully about any such possibility arising. So that actually is something we have to keep in mind. But in a structural sense, if you have a consolidated government with consolidated political control, then you can say that as a matter of policy or an act of omission or commission, kind of a policy is adopted for staging terrorist acts. For example, we know that Pakistan has not given up on its cross-border terrorism kind of policy that it has towards India. So the point actually is that that is a different scenario. And I don't at the moment think that that is something which is likely to emerge, because at the moment, I'm actually thinking that the people most worried would be the Pakistanis actually. I mean, the military might say, yes, Taliban is a friendly government, but we also have some history of the Taliban-Pakistan relationship when they were in power. And you understand how complicated that relationship itself was. So in fact, the Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan, who are actually based in Afghanistan, they actually have welcomed the Taliban victory, for example. Then these other groups, those who are involved in creating terrorist activities in Central Asian countries, they've also welcomed Taliban victory. And so have some of the Islamist generals in the Pakistan, retired generals who can actually talk freely. They have actually welcomed Taliban. Today in the papers, Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif said that the victory of Taliban actually means that Afghans have thrown off the shackles of slavery. I mean, how much more bizarre can you actually get in your thinking? So my sense actually is that an unstable country cannot provide security of any kind, whoever is looking at from the point of view their security. If Pakistan is thinking of strategic depth from their point of view vis-a-vis India, I don't think Taliban actually are in a position to provide that kind of a strategic support to them. As things are, things can change. We have to wait and see.
But how do you look at the responses that have so far come out of China, for example, has welcomed the opportunity to deepen ties with Afghanistan after the Taliban have captured Kabul. Pakistan has never left the side of Taliban. Then the Taliban has engaged Russia already. We know the role of Iran here. Turkey has also come in, and then the Qatar issue. There is a certain pattern emerging, isn't there?
No, that is true. I think these countries are looking at it in the larger global geopolitical sense, and they feel that the U.S. departure from Afghanistan actually means that kind of a geopolitical or strategic pressure with the U.S.-dominated government in Afghanistan might be able to exert on China or Russia or Iran, or for that matter, Pakistan, that pressure is gone. At that angle, yes, but at the same time, you would have seen statements made by the Chinese foreign minister, the Russian foreign minister, and even the Pakistani foreign minister, to the effect that the Americans have actually left in a very messy manner. It's a mess that has been left behind by them, and we have to actually handle it. So what I'm saying is that it's not that China and Russia and Iran and Pakistan, other countries, or Turkey are not looking at some possibilities, some opportunities there. I don't deny that. But there's still suspicion in their mind. That's what I'm trying to say. That the last meeting with the Taliban actually had, this Mullah Baradar had with Wang Yi in China, the Chinese foreign minister. They explicitly said that our relationship with you will be based on your ability to control. The Chinese actually have developed very close security relationship with Tajikistan, because Tajikistan again is in that Pamir area, which is actually part of Tajikistan. They actually have a military base there, which they had with the previous government in Afghanistan, a joint border management on the China-Afghanistan border. And the Chinese also have developed with the Tajiks the common security positions or posts along the entire Tajik-Afghan border, because they have fear that the Uyghurs who are actually present in the AFPAC area and the area which is under Taliban control, that they might at some stage be able to actually cross either directly into China from Afghanistan or go via Tajikistan. So the anxieties are very, very high. So the point is that they're looking for the opportunity. So in the case of Russia, of course, Russia doesn't face the Afghanistan border now with the Central Asian countries to do that, but all Central Asian countries are very worried.
So Pakistan is under watch through the Financial Action Task Force.
Yes. So I think hopefully better sense will prevail in Pakistan. They will realize that, it's not 1991 and their strategy against India is failing, and they cannot succeed by having a proxy ruling Afghanistan. They'll harm themselves, as they already begin to feel the heat, which actually is coming from in the AFPAC region.
Right. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
And now a report from the business world.
The BSE Sensex gained 210 points or 0.38% to close at 55,792. The NSE Nifty rose 52 points or 0.31% to settle at 16,615. Among global markets, shares in Asia Pacific declined as Chinese internet stocks fell amid regulatory fears. China's Shanghai Composite plunged 2% and Hong Kong's Hang Seng declined 1.7%. South Korea's Kospi and Singapore's Straits Times both fell 0.9% and Japan's Nikkei 225 slipped 0.4%. European stocks were mostly down in intraday trade. Oil prices fell, pairing earlier gains amid worries over slowing demand amid a spike in the Delta variant of coronavirus. In intraday trade, Brent crude was trading at around $69.20 per barrel. Anubha Rohatgi for World News, All India Radio.
This is All India Radio giving you the world news. For quick news updates round the clock, follow us on Twitter at AIR News Alerts.
India said that attacks on the cultural heritage of minority communities in Pakistan highlight the growing intolerance and lack of respect for minority communities in Pakistani society. In response to media queries regarding the vandalization of the statue of Maharaja Ranjit Singh in Lahore, MEA spokesperson Arindam Bagchi said this is the third such incident wherein the statue has been vandalized since it was unveiled in 2019.
New Zealand has announced a snap lockdown after a man was tested positive for COVID, the first such case in 6 months. The case was detected in Auckland, which will be in lockdown for a week, while the rest of the country will be in lockdown for 3 days. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern said that the toughest Level 4 rules were required, closing schools, offices and all businesses with only essential services remaining operational.
Prime Minister of India Narendra Modi has stressed the need to keep on improving the ways and system to develop sports culture in India. He pointed out that traditional sports are getting a new identity along with the promotion of international sports. Interacting with the para-athlete contingent for Tokyo 2020 Paralympic Games on Tuesday virtually, Mr. Modi highlighted that for recognizing local talents, 360 Khelo India centers have been established and these centers will be increased to 1,000 soon. Mr. Modi said the villages in remote areas are full of talent and the contingent of para-athletes are a living example of that. There are so many youngsters who have the ability to bring medals and the country is trying to reach out to them. Now let us take a look at the major developments around the world as reported in the foreign press. The Washington Post writes that Biden defends Afghanistan exit. The Wall Street Journal says that China unveils new rules targeting anti-competitive practices by internet companies. Gulf Times says that Kehrama to build 2 new stations to develop electrical work. The Guardian says Exxon's oil drilling gamble off Guyana coast poses major environmental risk. And Sputnik News says Russian scientists develop new methods to improve targeted cancer therapy. A quick look at the headlines once again. Prime Minister of India Narendra Modi chairs meeting of Cabinet Committee on Security following the events in Afghanistan. India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar discusses evolving situation in Afghanistan with his French counterpart. Indian Air Force aircraft C-17 brings back Indian envoy and officials from Kabul. New Delhi slams Islamabad for attacks on cultural heritage of minority communities in Pakistan. New Zealand orders snap lockdown after first COVID positive case in 6 months. And India's Prime Minister interacts with para-athlete contingent for Tokyo 2020 Paralympic Games virtually. India is celebrating the 151st birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi. Before we end, let us listen to his favorite bhajan, Vaishnav Jan, by artists from Indonesia on their Independence Day. And with that, we end this bulletin. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow with the next edition of World News.